Lots of things need saving. Polar bears, dates, this video file, and now apparently meeples. See, humans, as most of you know, are jerks and have been kidnapping meeples for years and have been forcing them to work in their board games. I like to think that my meeples work for me because they love me. If they don't, that leaves no one else who does. Just kidding, I love myself. In Save the Meeples, a worker placement game, players will lead their meeples to either escape their formerly happy land or defend it from the humans, which is kind of ironic now that I think about it, because as human players, we are helping the meeples escape or helping them fight us. I'm sure it makes sense to someone somewhere. What even is this game? Look at all this stuff. Now this is what we would call a table hog. But is it worth the setup, or is it just nice to look at and fun to play with? Let's find out. Now in Save the Meeples, you want to, well, save the meeples. And you're going to do that by building rocket ships to put the meeples on, launch into space, and then land them on their planet. Their safe planet that is safe for only them. But you have these pesky humans trying to come and grab the meeples before they can escape. So having said that, that means there are two different ways for this game to end. Either by a certain number of rocket ships launching off and saving the meeples, or by being overrun with the human beings. So for a short game, once 2 rockets have launched, the game is over, or 3 for a long game. And whenever 9 humans have come out, that's over for a short game, or 12 humans for a long game. So how do we save the meeples, or how does it get to where the humans come out? Well, let's go over a turn here. You have these player boards here that you'll keep track of your meeples, your resources, and the humans that you defeat. That's right, you can defeat humans and put them in your jails. This is a 2 to 4 player game, so there are also components for 2 other players. The game comes with these great player aids that on one side it shows you the different actions and the steps of a turn, and then on the other side it shows you what you can spend your happy and sad tickets for. Why happy? Why sad tickets? I don't know, but I'll explain those whenever I get to them. First part of your turn, if you've been off fighting the humans and you've got meeples into your injury tent, you get to move them up 1 space because each space they get closer to being able to be used again. After you've done that, or if you don't have any meeples to move, you will do an action. Now there are 4 different actions you can do. The first one is to load some meeples onto a train. Now this is a 2-player game, and so for a 2-player, there are these pieces of cardboard that fill up the train so that there aren't as many spaces. And that's what these things are over here for a 3-player game. And if you're playing a 4-player game, then the whole train is completely available. So you'll choose 1, 2, or 3 meeples to load onto a train like so. That's one action. Another action is to load meeples onto a spaceship. Now there is a spaceship that starts the game. There's one that begins when the game begins. So let's say I put 2 there. Another option is to make the train go, so it's mandatory that you go choo 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 choo. And then once the train arrives at its destination, everybody that's aboard the train gets to come out and do actions there at the locations. And there are symbols like most worker placement games where it tells you only this many meeples can come here, and only by 1 player or by multiple players, just depending on what the action is. Each location has different actions you can do. Over here at the tavern, you can come over here and get more meeples. Recruit them in their drunken stupor to come help you escape. Over here at the mine, you can come get resources that you're gonna need to build this rocket over here, which that's what you do over here at the forest. You build portions of the rocket, so you pay the resources and you flip it over. And once that's all done, you get a new rocket to place over here that can be launched as well. You also come over here to defeat humans. Now they'll come out from the forest, and again, if ever you reach that number, 9 or 12, depending on the length of the game is over. So another action you can do over here is defeat the humans. Whenever you defeat a human, they go to your prison. But then because you've been working so hard and they might attack back, your meeple becomes injured and has to come over here to the tent. Final location is the forge, and this is where you're going to go to make the rocket ready to launch. And for each time you pay for certain things, you're going to turn the dial here, and once it gets down to go, the rocket launches, and whether there are meeples on it or not, the rocket will take off, and you put whatever meeples are on it onto the planet to be saved. And the 4th action is to just bring the train back, and then you will retrieve your meeples, and whoever was out there on that train doing those actions at the location will also retrieve their meeples. Now, when the game is over, If the game is over because a certain number of rockets have launched, the meeples on the planet will give you points at the end of the game, in addition to the points that you've earned throughout the game itself. If the game ends by humans coming out and overrunning the forest, then the meeples that have been sent off to this planet don't give you anything, and only the humans in your jail cell will give you points. Likewise, if the game ends by the rockets launching, the humans in your jail don't give you any points. So it's all dependent on how the game ends. Just some other things to point out. There are large and small. The large human beings are tougher to defeat. You've got your pieces of your ship, points, tickets. What are the tickets for? Well, whenever you bring a train back, or there are other ways to get tickets, you can get a happy or a sad ticket. Again, I don't know why they're happy or sad, but there are different abilities you can get by spending tickets. You got coins, wood, stone, and oil that's going to be all used for building the rocket and sometimes some other things. One last thing, I want to show you a close-up of the different locations just because these are cool. They're like these 3D pop-up kind of things, and the artwork looks good on them. So I wanted to highlight that for you to see. So that was the forest. Here is the tavern where the meeples are having too much to drink. Over here is the mine that pops out. It even goes into the mine. That's pretty cool. And then finally we have the forge. It's got a cool water mill and little waterfall coming out. I really like these. Now this is a well-made game. Great components all around. The resources, the trains and the train beds. Oh gosh, the backdrops for the locations, they're beautiful, just the artwork alone. But then the way that they fold out and pop out and become 3D, that's so cool. And I've never seen that in a board game before. They're not necessary, but they add so much to the scenery of the game. Now I will say that they are difficult to fold out, and they're pretty fragile, so sometimes it's easy to fold where it shouldn't fold. So you got to be careful when you're folding those out. And sometimes they don't come up to a 90 degrees. Sometimes they flop out like this. So just keep that in mind. I think it's worth it. I think they're cool to look at, but you might not. One thing I didn't point out previously is that the box itself, it doesn't have an organizer per se. There's a little cardboard thing in there, but printed on the box itself, it shows where to put all the pieces. So, I mean, there's a lot in there, and this does a great job of showing you where to put everything so it fits in the box, which is important because that affects your setup and teardown time. Now, even with that, it does take a long time to set up and put away because there's just so much there, but I think it's worth it. Another thing you have to be careful of other than the backdrops are those spaceships. Now, if you pick them up in the wrong way, they're going to fall apart. What you need to do is probably glue them together because there's no reason for you to take them apart because they fit in the box just fine. So glue them together, that way it doesn't fall apart every time you try to move them. Now mechanically, this is a pretty standard worker placement game, I guess you could say. The game's not standard, but the way that worker placement works is standard. You take your meeples, some spaces require 1, some require 2, some require 3, and then most spaces you can only send your meeples to. They're not spaces for other team members or other teams of meeples to go to. And so those are restricted, but there are still spaces that any amount of meeples can go to, and then you can do those actions. So you see that in other games. Nothing new here with that regard. Now there is an interesting take on action programming. It's very subtle, but what happens is whenever you decide to put your meeples in the train, you load them from back to front. But once the train takes off and goes to its destination in order to execute those actions, the actions are executed from the front to back. So you may be thinking, aha, I got into the train before you. Well, joke's on you, because whenever the train gets to this destination, you have last pick at the actions. So interesting thing that you have to think about when you put those meeples in the train in order to figure out which order you're going to execute those actions. Overall, it's got an easy turn structure, easy concept to understand. You've got 3 steps to your turn. You move along a meeple on the damage track, you do an action, and then you discard down to 10 resources. Your actions, there are only 4, and they're all self-explanatory, really easy. Load a train, move a train back, or load meeples onto a rocket ship. Easy enough. However, the decisions that you make are tough. So I've got a list here. First of all, how should I make the game end? What's my strategy here? Am I going to go all in on putting meeples on the planets, and so that way the game will end when the rocket ships launch and get points for all my meeples? Or do I stay and focus my time on the town where we're at and fight off those humans and get points that way? How will my opponents end the game? I need to pay attention to what they're doing so that, again, I don't go all in on one area and they end up ending the game in a different way. Again, so should I risk going all in on one area or the other? That's a big risk. So maybe I ask myself, is there a middle ground there? Do I split up how I'm doing my meeples? Because the thing you have to realize is when you put meeples over onto the planet, they're gone forever. You don't get them back to use them. So you're losing the amount of meeples that you have to do actions. So that's a pretty big trade-off, especially if the game doesn't end in your favor. So maybe there's a middle ground there. I don't know, but it's something that I think about constantly. And I enjoy that back and forth in my mind and trying to not only figure out what I'm going to do, but try to anticipate what my opponents are doing. And that's very fascinating to me. It's funny, there's almost this cooperative element to the game, because if you don't want the game to end so soon, you kind of all have to work together to fight back those humans. It's like somebody's got to do it or else the game will end quickly. So everyone's kind of like, who's going to do it? I'm not going to waste my actions doing it. Maybe you should do it. Well, if I don't want to do it either. So it's kind of funny when that happens. But it's just an interesting thing about the game that I haven't experienced anywhere else. I have to mention it. The trains are fun. I enjoy loading and driving the trains, and it's completely unnecessary, but it's what makes the game. Without those trains, it's just another worker placement game. And they're fun. And again, something that's very unique to this game. Something else that's unique to the game is the theme. And I worry that the theme is going to be restrictive. You know, it's so unique, and there are so many people in this world that still don't know what meeples are. So I guess the target audience for this game is gamers. We all know what meeples are, but do we really? What does it mean to save the meeples? I mean, it just looks silly, and the box is what initially caught my attention at BGGCon. I saw this guy coming after this meeple, and the meeple is running away, and I said, I have to check this game out. It looks ridiculous, and you know, in reality, it is. And I enjoy it for its ridiculousness. But is that going to be a barrier to other people discovering and enjoying the game? If you're interested, it is a sequel of sorts to a game called Meeple War. Meeple Wars, one of those things. And so they've fought this war, now they're in this town, now they're trying to escape the humans. I wonder if there'll be another sequel, maybe like Meeple Planet or something after they launch and go off. But it is a sequel, so I thought that I would mention that. Let's talk about player count now. It is 2 to 4 players. It works at all player counts, but I prefer more. So 4 definitely. The reason why is because you have more opponents to try to outthink or try to analyze what they're doing. And there's more player interaction that way when it comes to putting your meeples on the action spaces. With 2 players, it's still fun, but you don't have that kind of competition going on. They could either go one way or the other, and it's pretty obvious if you're just paying attention to one person which way they want the game to end. So it's not as much of a mystery or something that you have to analyze. So I definitely prefer it at higher player counts, but again, it works at 2 to 3. And with the difference in player counts, it's going to affect the time to play. But it's not too long. I think that it's just the right amount of time. With the 2-player game, I think we've done it in an hour. I think maybe with 4 players, if everybody understands what they're doing, you could probably do it in an hour and a half. The thing you might get caught up on is just the actions at each location. I think that the symbology is pretty intuitive. I think it explains what's going on pretty well. But there might be people that it doesn't quite click with them, so they might be going, what do I do here? Where can I go to do this? That might trip you up a little bit. But if everybody understands what they're doing, I really do think you can do it in an hour and a half, 2 hours at the max. Finally, I want to talk about complexity. Now, for me, it's an easy game. For a new gamer, someone being introduced to gaming, I wouldn't recommend this, especially as an introduction to worker placement. I think you need to stick with something like Lords of Waterdeep. That's pretty straightforward. This one, while the mechanisms are easy, you still have the things to think about of the strategy really is what it comes down to, of where to go. There's 4 different locations to go, and each location has multiple actions to think about, and then you've got to think about which way the game's going to end. I just don't think this is a great one to introduce to newer gamers. One step beyond that, I think it's fine. As long as someone's played a worker placement game before and kind of it understands that concept and maybe a little bit of action programming, then this will be great. You don't have to be deep into the hobby to enjoy this one, but definitely not a first introductory game. So I worry that people will miss this game, but you shouldn't. Now, I want to save the Meeples. It just barely misses the threshold for a seal of excellence, so consider it a very high seal of approval. I think that if you can find a copy, it's definitely worth checking out. I want you to tell me about the things you think should be saved, perhaps my career in board game media. Tweet it to me at hey_lighten up. And check out the Lighten Up initiative on YouTube for more reviews, comedy sketches, playthroughs, and previews. Until next time, don't take the board game hobby too seriously, unless we're talking about saving meeples. Then you can be serious. Otherwise, ask yourself if you're being a grumpopotamus. If so, then lighten up.